All right, so counter to what conservatives wanted you to believe, Joe 94 crime bill Biden and Kamala top cop Harris do not actually support defunding and demilitarizing the police. And we have some good data, some good reporting here that is exposing the extent to which Joe Biden and his administration are actually ramping up the militarization of the police force in the United States. So again, good reporting here by Steven Semler. If you want to go support his work, I recommend it. You'll get information like this. So flow of military gear to the police has sped up under Biden. So you can see here a couple of years that were under Trump. You had about $24 million worth, $25 million worth, $13 million in 2020 in the quarter of Q4. And then in Q1 2021, $34 million. Biden significantly ramping it up compared to Trump's last year. So what's going on here? Why is this happening? So here's where the information is coming from. The Pentagon's 1033 program is the primary mechanism by which police acquire military hardware. Most of the items transferred are innocuous, but that's only in terms of quantity. In terms of value, combat gear dominates the ledger. Not surprisingly, the latter fact typically escapes police/DoD discourse. Material is what's counted here. The values below reflect that of military hardware controlled equipment transferred through the 1033 program and not the office supplies or generators or t-shirts or whatever uncontrolled equipment. So that's what this graph is representing here. The most common items sent to police this quarter were firearm magazines, 940 total, 600 for 9mm pistols, 331 for 5.56mm rifles, M4 or M16, 9 for 7.62mm rifles, M14s presumably, and military vehicles, 246 comprised most of the total acquisition value, about 21 million out of 33.5 million. And so here's what the policy action needs to be. I like this article because it's very concise. It gives you the information, where it's coming from, what it means, and then tells you what we can actually do about it. And this is really important because the militarization of the police, there is a direct correlation between increased militarization and getting weapons and vehicles like this, and violence within these communities. There is a direct correlation there. The more we militarize our police force, the more they are going to use those weapons and vehicles against civilians. So we know this is true, and so it's important that we undo this trend. It's important that we demilitarize the police and defund the police and reallocate some of those resources towards more effective community-based programs instead of just using violence all the time. And so here's what they recommend, or he recommends, on policy actions. So Congress needs to pressure Biden to issue an executive order, 1, to prevent future transfers, and 2, recall military equipment from police custody. Unlike the uncontrolled equipment referenced above, controlled equipment, the dangerous stuff, is on a conditional loan. And so Biden can simply order the Department of Defense to take it back from the police, and you can see their latest policy brief on this. And basically that's what they recommend that Joe Biden and his administration do. So this is, again, this is something that's really simple and yet really important. That is something that we don't really talk about nearly enough in this conversation around defunding and demilitarizing the police. This is what we would expect from somebody like Joe Biden, somebody who wrote the crime bill, somebody who is largely responsible for the situation that we have with our policing right now. And you look at these police budgets and they are extremely inflated, similar and analogous to how our military budgets are inflated. And you see the crossover here because how our military acts overseas in that capacity as an occupying force in many of these countries, in many cases illegally occupying force and violent occupying force. And you see the crossover between how our military operates on a foreign policy angle and how our police are operating on a domestic angle. This type of shit, the hyper-militarization of the police, is just our foreign policy agenda coming back home. Okay, and so we have to stop this trend. We cannot be militarizing our police to be wielding this force against our own civilians, let alone militarizing our military and what we are doing foreign policy. But that entire foreign policy thing is a different discussion. But the importance here is the overlap between our military production capabilities and how that is implementing down the line with our police forces. And so if we want to seriously address police reform in this country, then this is one of the things that you're going to have to do. So great reporting here. I recommend you go read the entire article and check their sources and check some of the studies that have been done on these issues. But again, there's a direct correlation between hyper-militarizing the police in this way and how that force and those weapons are going to be used on the civilians in these different jurisdictions. So this is a really important conversation, probably going to be mostly swept under the rug, as liberals seem to be falling straight in line with Joe Biden's pro-police agenda, and he's not really taking it seriously. He's not taking the ideas behind something like defund the police and that movement seriously. We need to be operating and moving towards more community-oriented policies and community-oriented forces that don't have to be using guns and military weapons like this.